Well, folks, once again, Captain Boat Builder here, welcoming you back to my basement boat yard. Today is episode number 8, and we're calling this one Getting Ready for the Deck. I do want to back up just a little bit and apologize for two things. You would think after all these simple videos that I've made, I wouldn't be making these mistakes, but you may have noticed in the last one, I somehow got the camera positioned in a way that I cut the top of my head off. That was not intentional. And also, some of the pictures are actually taken upside down. It's up to you to find them, but I seem to use my phone the same way all the time, and why these images are upside down is beyond me. But I do apologize for that. So let's get started. Once again, episode number 8, Getting Ready for the Deck. Working now on installing the upper mast partner. You can see it's easily held in place with just one adjustable clamp. And you may notice that this part right here, I've taken green tape and I've put it on both sides of the guide mark. And the reason I've done that is so that when I'm sighting along the center line to make sure that this is in the correct position, it's much easier to sight with that space in the tape than actually to see the line. I hope you can see this in the picture, but I've got the string, the fore and aft center line string. You notice at the top, it's square with the daggerboard case, and as I go back and forth, you can see how it squares with that alignment line. This is really only especially important for the mast leaning from side to side, from port to starboard. There is a space in here for little adjustments, but I wanted to get it as close to perfect as I could, even though you can see that some of these marks that I've put on the frames on the top of the bulkhead, they don't quite line up, but it does line up, and should be able to get the mast perfectly straight side to side. Later I'll be flipping the boat over because it's going to require a fillet under here. And rather than do a blind fillet, it's just much easier to roll the boat upside down, crawl under there, do the sanding, and lay on a nice big thick fillet to hold it in place. As I mentioned before, you want a perfectly straight line between these surfaces here, the front of the daggerboard case and the back of the daggerboard case. So you want your 4-foot straight edge to touch evenly here and up here. And what you'll find is that because this piece is glued perpendicular, you have to take material off. You have to take this off. And if you look down in the bilge here, you'll see how much material came off. It's quite a bit. And you can also see the difference in the thickness of the wood. Still plenty strong. But the idea is you want the deck to follow this line perfectly, and the deck is going to glue here, here, and across here, and also up in the bow. So you want a perfectly straight line. I did this most of this work with a small block plane. I also used a block sanding pad, and I used the longboard. The longboard was especially good trying to get this as flat as possible. So these are just tiny little details, and you do all this so that the deck lays perfectly flat and has good contact at all points. So here I am under the boat. The boat's upside down on the horses. And what we're looking at right now is the bottom side of the upper mast step. And I purposely put the boat upside down so that this fillet right here, which connects the mast step to the bulkhead, could be a large one. I wanted plenty of strength, and it's just much easier to do it upside down. This is the clamping that I used to secure the cleats at the front of the spear. I clamped them to the spear, and then I clamped the whole thing to the table. I want this to be as flat as possible. That's the way it's supposed to fit. And just as another example of the quality of this kit and the quality of the machining of the pieces, I wanted you to take a look here at these cleats. These cleats are not only curved, these are not straight. They're curved, they're cut on a curve, and they're also beveled on the outside right there because of the shape, the sort of V shape of the hull. So you've got cleats that are cut on a curve and beveled just to hold this front part of the spear in the bow up against the hull. It's just really, really nice when they make a kit that's made the way it's supposed to be made and all the pieces go together. In getting the boat ready for installing the mast tube, and I followed all the directions in the manual, first thing I did was get the boat level, completely level from left to right. I've got a stick here across the middle of the boat. It's perfectly level there. I had the level on this portion of the bow. It's level here. I had the level across the back, and it's level there. So I know that left and right, the boat is level. Then the next step is when you put the tube in place, the idea is to get the tube completely vertical. You want it straight fore and aft, and you want it straight left and right. And what you have to do, because if you just have the boat relatively level, you won't get this in the tube. So you have to start jacking up the back. And you can see all the different size pieces of wood that I've used. A little bit here, a little bit there, different size pieces of wood and different size wedges. And I jacked up the back just enough so that when the tube sits pretty much in that position, it's going to be level left and right. And again, as it shows in the instruction manual, you check that out with the level up against the side of the tube. And you're going to check fore and aft and left and right. And then slowly you're going to keep moving these little toothpicks around until you get it just quite right. And you can see it's not necessarily going to be centered in the holes, but it is correct. Also, I filled the bottom here about halfway with a mix of glue and 404 adhesive. And then when it's all set up, I'm going to come back and backfill all this with liquid. I'm going to flip the boat over, and I'm going to put a fillet underneath the edge here to act as, they call it a dam. I'm going to put a fillet all the way around so that this will be in place, and then I'm going to inject unthickened resin into this space, so that it's perfectly encapsulated and it cannot move. So that's how I went about placing the mast tube so we get the mast itself to be in correct alignment. So now I've got the mast tube secured at the top and the bottom. You can see I still have to put the injected unthickened resin in here to fill the space. This has been filled. It needs just a little bit more. I'll be doing that. But I do have the fillet under here, so this is not moving. So the mast base is in its final position. And I just wanted to do a check just to satisfy myself, given that there's really nothing I can do about it right now. But I've got the boat sitting on the floor in the basement, and it's propped up and it's level. I've checked it right here, just ahead of the mast bulkhead. I've checked it in the middle of the boat. I've checked it with the daggerboard case. I've also checked it in the back with the seat. So I know that the boat, from side to side, I know the boat is perfectly level. So now the question is, how well did I do with my installation of the mast tube? What I wanted to show you, as you can see, of course, that there's a little bit of play. And this is only the bottom half of the mast. Fortunately, I have enough clearance in my basement. So there's a little bit of play that no matter how you position it, you're going to have the play. And what that looks like at the top, the play looks like this. It moves, and you can see that a relatively small movement at the bottom, of course, produces a bigger movement at the top. But I just wanted to show you what I've been able to accomplish. I think it's going to be completely satisfactory. I'm going to put the level on the mast right here. I don't know if you can see this. So now the mast is in. Now the mast is in the full to the left side of the boat position. This is what it would be like if you were on the starboard tack, and you can see that it's one bubble off. Now part of that also is the fact that the mast tapers. So if I pull the level out just a little bit to compensate for the taper, you can see how the bubble moves. But pushing the mast to the left side of the boat, full deflection, I'm just one bubble off. And then if I do it on the other side, again, I've got the level up against the mast, and I'm pushing it to the right, which would be port tack, as much as I can. You can see that it's about a quarter to a third of a bubble off. So those are the parameters. So what this means, of course, is that the mast leans a little bit more to the left than it does to the right. But that's as close as I can get it, and I will be certain to get back to you once I'm sailing to tell you if I can detect any error, any difference between how it handles on the port tack versus the starboard tack. And because of the way the mast is leaning slightly, ever so slightly, on the starboard tack, the mast should be a little bit more to leeward, and on the port tack, the mast should be a little bit more toward the vertical. So I'm finished with the mast tube installation, except for just a little bit of glass work, and I've done my test here in the basement, and I'm satisfied with the results. When you get ready to think about gluing down the deck panel, there are a couple of things that you ought to consider. As I've said many times, I'm a big proponent of dry fitting. What you're looking at now is everything put together, but nothing is glued. All the tape that you see is just guide tape that's going to help me with the filleting. It's going to help me with the cleanup. But what I wanted to show you as you're dry fitting this, be sure, like in this part right here, when you press it down, it's going to be held in place with the little nail. Be sure that the deck, this where my thumb is just a little bit proud. In other words, it sticks out a little bit from the vertical piece right here. And the reason for that is when this is all glued together, you want to be able to sand this edge flush with the verticals, and you want to be able to round it so you get some nice grain. But it's important that that the deck sticks out just a fraction, and you can feel it with your fingers just a little bit, because as I said, it has to sort of be proud, sticking out, so that you'll have something that you can sand to make this a good edge. You can see right here that this one is not quite proud, and what that means is that this side panel has to be pushed in just a tiny bit. And in order to do that, I think what you have to do is you have to sand the back of the bulkhead here so that the panel can go this way just a fraction of an inch, and then it can effectively move in, and it will be proud on the side panel of this box. So don't skimp on the time dry fitting, so that you're sure when you glue this all together that it winds up the way you want it. Here's another example right here. See, even with these clamps and stuff, this piece, the deck, should stick out at just a tiny fraction of an inch past the side panel here, and it doesn't. So what that means, again, is some sanding here to move the side panel a little bit this way at the top, and then you'll be able to have a nice, beautiful edge. Again, all this green tape is just here for making the cleanup with the filleting easier. So again, use clamps, use tape, use whatever you want, but before you actually get ready to glue it, be sure that all of the edges are just a little bit proud, so that when you sand it, you're going to get the kind of a corner that you really want. Well, I finally got the so-called forward seat walls installed. They're tacked in with just a little bit of epoxy. You can see it there. You can see it right there. I've just got all the corners tacked in because I didn't want to do the filleting in this part. I wanted to be sure that they were secure so that they wouldn't move around while I was doing the filleting. And they're tacked in place. I'll be doing this tomorrow. It took literally hours to get what I was hoping for in the way of a perfect fit, especially, as I pointed out before, right along here and up in the bow. One thing that I've done that's changed a little bit from the standard plans is you can see that right here ahead of the daggerboard case, I've installed yet another bulkhead. This is some scrap wood I had that's quite thin and very unusual grain pattern. I like it. I got one there, and then I've got one that's forward. And so what this is going to do is it's going to make the compartment, the storage compartment, which will be this area in here, it's going to make the storage compartment a little bit smaller, because I realized that trying to reach through the hatch and reach all the way back into this corner, or to reach all the way up into these corners, if you had anything that was stowed there, it could be hard to get at if your arm wasn't exactly long. So I've made the compartment a little bit smaller. Should be much easier to pick up stuff that I have stowed there. So as soon as the epoxy cures, that's just temporarily holding these things in place, I'll be back doing all of the filleting and pulling off all this ugly green tape. And then this area will be complete and ready for the deck. It took a long time, but it's turning out just fine. Here's a very simple setup. I should have started using this before. It's a way to keep the boat secure on its side so you can work on the inside of the boat without having to bend over too much. When I wound up finishing off this whole structure for the daggerboard trunk, the mast step, the side seat panels, this is all the superstructure for the deck, for the spear deck. It's much, much easier to work on this when you're just standing here and you're just easily reaching inside, doing whatever you're doing without having to reach over the edge of the boat. They have a nice connection point in the main bulkhead, nice hole there. And it's just a simple rope up to a pulley. Pull the boat up on its side. And I also used 2 clamps front and back on the sawhorses just to be sure that the bottom wouldn't shift. But it's wound up being a really nice way to work on the boat. And the other thing that I realized is that because these side panels are flat, you can set this thing at different angles. It can rest on this panel, it can even rest on this panel and the gunnel, or you can rest it on this panel. So you have a lot of nice flat surfaces to make contact with the tops of the sawhorses. So it's just an easy way to work on the boat at a different angle. It's going to help me a lot when I start varnishing. So folks, this is the finished, I'll call it the center section, but this is the part of the boat that's going to support the forward deck. The deck's going to fit right on top of this box. It's going to have a hole in it, of course. For the daggerboard, it's got a little hole for the mast. We're going to have a nice hole for a hatch here in the center. This is the storage area that I made. As I said, it's slightly smaller, but I think it's going to be more usable. And it's going to fit right up into the bow. So this is all finished. And so now this section of the boat is finished and it's ready for the deck. So in a preview, in the next segment, I'm going to be installing the deck. And that's when the boat really will start to look finished. Also, because I can't resist beautiful wood, I've also started working on the gunnels. Been doing a lot of sanding, a lot of smoothing. This is 2 coats of epoxy. There will be more. I'm deviating slightly from the plan, and I'll explain why, but it all has to do with the way things look. So that's the preview for next time. And once again, thanks for watching. So long.